norms and stereotypes to making sure that the butts are white. Boy, girl, mom and dad want grown-up time, you're going mad. It's a trip, but we'll guide you through with tips and tricks for boys and girls too.
And we're live with Boy, Girl, Mom, and Dad.
I'm Lauren.
And I'm Nick.
Welcome. We are so glad that you're here, and I'm really excited to talk about this episode with you. It is called The Supermom Myth, episode 25.
Wow. 25.
Yeah. I want to talk about that, and it's going to be a really good conversation. But before we do that, I wanted to kind of do some updates. I have a lot of updates. So,
hi. If you've just joined us, we're going to be talking for like 25 minutes about corrections and changes to previous episodes. Not corrections, but things that we've discussed since that we think are relevant. If you want to go straight to the subject of this podcast, go to this time code here, 3458. Okay, let's get you back to listening.
The first thing I wanted to update on is from episode 22, The Weight of Invisible Work, part 2. There was a conversation Nick and I had about the word man-child, and Nick said something along the lines of, man-child? I just don't like the negative language or something like that. And after we recorded, he said, do you want me to say it or you don't want to say it?
I'll say it.
Okay. I'll let him update you. But he said something, and I was like, why didn't you say that on air? And he's like, I was going to.
She said it less angry and mean than that.
I said it because I was like, that was really good. And I think people would have liked that. And so here's what he meant by that.
Okay, I'll say what I said. What I said was, instead of saying that he's being a man-child or lazy, you can say that you need him to be more proactive.
Yeah. I really liked that because...
We've talked about this, but you see how that's different, right?
I do see how that's different, and I see how it's a more productive statement. I think I'm not really for calling names, or name calling, I guess is how the people say it. And that's assuming someone is calling you to your face a man-child, which if an argument got heated, I could see how someone would call someone to their face. But obviously saying that to their face is not going to be productive or make them change. And honestly, saying the other statement may not make them change, but just saying something like, it would help me if you were more proactive, here's why. And I get, you don't want to have to ask that. You don't have to say it. Like, I totally get that. But calling them man-child is not going to fix the problem.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just, oh, this is important, instead of calling somebody a name. And I also don't think it's like, use this only as a response to somebody calling you a name. The point is, if you're thinking, oh, he's being a man-child, you're in the wrong mindset. Because you're initially assuming that he's doing something intentionally to hurt you when there's just a gap between you guys. I understand that there can be those that are intentionally choosing. I'm saying if you're stepping in right away and just assuming that that's your guy or your girl, and you're thinking, oh, they're being such a man-child or baby or whatever, maybe you need to reset your initial state of thinking. This is a good way to approach it, like from a messaging perspective, but we shouldn't be thinking man-child or nagging or B-word or any of the other things that we're calling each other
B-word
in our heads.
This is a safer work podcast.
Balloon.
Baby. I just wanted to say, though, yeah, they might not be malicious, but I just want to say that doesn't mean it isn't hurtful. I think, no, let me finish. I saw your eyes. Let me finish. I'm just saying that sometimes it hurts more to not be thought about or not be considered than someone maliciously hurting you, because it's like, okay, you don't care about me. I'm just validating that feeling.
I think there's a difference between they're thinking about something else in the moment and they haven't thought about you at all.
Or they haven't thought about me enough to actually do something or actually
Is
care.
it possible that you're setting an unattainable standard?
Well, I mean, I'm going to talk about this in a second. I forget where I wrote this in this outline, but more and more women are choosing not to get married because their life is easier. I'm not going to say better, easier without the man. Hey, hold on. But I just want to say there are statistics out there that say that men still view like marriage as a good idea when more women are saying no, it's not really for me because there are these man children out there. and I also I wrote this down too. I forget where I wrote it, but I'll say like this is what I was talking about when we get to that point. But when like parents are divorcing more and the wife's life doesn't really change at all because she's still doing all the work. And then in these scenarios that they were studying, the men's lives get worse because they're realizing all of the work that their partner was doing. It's not every case, but there are more studies that have come out with that.
You don't know what I'm going to say to rebut
Okay.
you. I know that that study exists. I know that it makes sense, and I'm with you. It does make sense. What
Oh,
I take issue with is that you said that women's lives are easier and men's lives are harder when they're separated. And I don't agree with that. I don't think you meant it objectively, but you said it objectively. I don't think that's accurate. I think that the survey was subjective. It's based on responses of both men and women. The women more consistently responded that it was easier for them to do things on their own than trying to communicate to the men and trying to get them to help in the way that they expected them to help. And the guys, to your earlier point, didn't know how much was involved in taking care of the house and kids if they were there. But
so
it's not an objective measurement.
I think that you're combining two things. The one statement I made is that fewer women are getting married, or as we know, they're getting married later because you kind of know the person better usually, and you've kind of grown up, past the age of 26 when your brain stops growing or whatever that is. But the other statistic that I mentioned was about parents specifically. The marriage piece was separate of data, just like that the women's lives were generically easier. But as far as the parent one goes, when they've separated, the women's life didn't get easier. It was just the same, but they just didn't have to be, I guess, let down or whatever this is. I'm about to say something that I think is going to validate some of what you're saying in the next point. But I just wanted to say that those two are separate points, the parents and then the marriage part separately.
Okay.
So to kind of back you up in some of the things that you're saying, my sister sent me a TikTok this morning that was about the mental load. I actually texted it to you. I don't know if you had a chance to
I
watch
watched
it.
it.
And it's good if you're looking for more information or kind of around what the mental load is if you're still struggling to like, what does this look like? It's the invisible work. But what does that mean? And the mom is referencing like, you know, do you know that it's gym day on Wednesday and they have to pack their tennis shoes? It's worse in the summer when there's summer camp and you have to prepare for all these days. Like you need cash on Wednesday for pizza day and it has to be exact cash. And the next day is ice cream day and it costs $2 to $5. So make sure to pack that cash. And she's kind of angry. And I didn't watch the whole video. And there's nothing wrong with what she said. I think her feelings are valid. However, there's a way to go about it. This is something that's changing right now. So if you have been living this life where you are bearing the mental load and that's the pattern for your relationship, I don't think it is helpful to get angry now for something that's been happening that you haven't addressed emotionally, verbally to the person.
Sorority
Getting
snaps.
getting angry is valid. Acting on that anger, I don't think is valid if that has been your pattern and you haven't had a discussion. That is assuming that they don't want to help, they won't help, all that stuff.
Taking action would also include like seething in your anger and choosing out of resentment to not say something to your husband or not enter into a discussion about how to fix it. That's also action. So it's not just, you may be thinking this, but it's not just like name calling, passive aggressive things, yelling. Like it's, if you're choosing to not try and step in and repair, you're also taking action on that anger, to your point, and you probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah, and I think the other stickier situation is where you've asked for help and they let you down. The other person doesn't help, says no, or forgets, or something like that. And I think that is hard because this affects your child. It doesn't just affect you. And so you don't want to let your child down. So there is that mindset of, I can do it the best way, so I'm going to take it on. So if you're not allowing them to help, whatever your reason is, whether you don't think they'll do a good job or they just won't do it, it's not fair still. Like your feelings are valid, but the way you're going about it is fair. And I'm not assuming that she is mad at her partner for these types of things. I think she's just stressing the whole load and that it is a lot, and that's valid.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, it can be frustrating if you've asked for help and it's not happening. I think we can draw a line at the intentional defiance. If the person has heard you, understands your request, and is still just choosing not even to try, yes, let's be mad at that person. We'll deal with that a different way. But I don't think it's a reasonable expectation that they will just fix what you're asking them to do 100% every time after you've asked them. You and I have had this discussion where you've gotten angry, justifiably so, that I haven't remembered something, heard you correctly, done something you've consistently asked me for, but it's not an intentional choice that I'm not doing it. And sometimes I do need to be nudged. There are things like that in our relationship where, with and without the kids, where it took a little while for you to consistently remind me things. And then it's like, oh, now it's a pattern and you haven't had to ask me for a while. So I'm not saying that should be the expectation that you have to coach somebody along and remind them, but I'm saying you need to have grace after your requests. Just because you've asked for something, it's not fair to expect them to be perfect. And that's going to set you up for failure and set you as the requester up for feelings of resentment and anger when somebody else may actually be trying to meet your request, just not as quickly as you're expecting them to.
And I think it's hard. I think it's hard because and I've explained this to you, in my mind, me having to remind you is still a step. And there are instances, hypothetical instances, I'm not thinking of anything right now, where it was easier for me to just do it myself than have to remind you, whether it be the response I was met with when I reminded, or just like you weren't ready to talk about it. And then I still have to like, okay, let me put it back on my shelf and like feel the weight of that. And like, why am I the one who has to remind you? Why can't you figure out a system to remind yourself?
Those are fair thoughts.
Yeah,
But we've
yeah.
also coached people here to let your partner and your kid fail a little bit. We've also, you just a minute ago, told people to let them help you.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I know that it's hard and letting people in
I'm
on
not,
my
yes, I fully understand that it's hard. And I acknowledge at the beginning, like that can be a frustrating thing when especially when you've consistently asked for change and it's not happening at the pace that you expect it to happen. Again, setting aside the intentional malicious people who are not even trying to help you. If somebody's trying to help you, maybe instead of seeing, oh, they didn't do it again, or they didn't do it the way I asked them to again, maybe see like, oh, they're trying, or like they did like try to do it, but it's not exactly right. Like, but man, 2 years ago, or not years, but like 2 weeks ago, before I asked him this, like he wouldn't have even thought about this, like I think it is healthier for the requester to get in that pattern. Yes, we should put an expectation on the person who's being asked to help. They are trying and consistently trying to improve, but I don't think that expectation of perfection is fair for either party, for the person who you've asked to help you, or for you and your mental health as the person who's reaching out and asking for help.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to say kind of a yes and like this is kind of the mindset that is good, while also acknowledging that it can be extremely frustrating because sometimes letting them
Yeah,
fail is also letting yourself fail, and like I don't want to fail.
sure. No, I'm
So
with you. I know that it's a line, and I'm not trying to give a blanket. You're right. I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just saying it would be nice if we're giving grace after requests as well. That's all.
yeah, and I think this, you can cut this if you don't want this in here, but I think a good example of how to handle it I did this morning. We got our laundry back from rinse, and Nick was being helpful. He brought the towels and stuff upstairs, and we were doing a lot of things last night. We were trying to pack. We leave tomorrow for our big trip, and so we were doing a lot of things. But I went to get my yoga towel out this morning, and I tried to open the door, and I couldn't because the stack of towels was literally just right outside of the cabinet. And so I didn't get mad. I could have gotten mad, but I just like popped into the room because he was awake. I would not have woken him up to ask this. I was like, hey, can I ask you a question that like I'm not mad, but I just want to know the answer to? And I was like, why? And he said yes. And he's like, can you tell me why the towels and stuff were just left on the ground outside of the cabinet? And I didn't say outside the cabinet when it would have taken 5 seconds
You
to
said
put them
outside the
in.
cabinet instead of putting them away, but yeah, you're right. You're right.
But I didn't use inflammatory language of like,
Correct.
it would have taken 5 seconds. And he was like, oh, I just knew we were trying to do stuff and I just put them outside of there. Because in my head, and that's like a pure heart. It wasn't like you were being malicious, like, oh, I'm going to go do this. It wasn't like, I don't want to. It's like, we're doing this other thing. Where in my head, it's more along the lines of, it's just right there. It'll take 2 extra seconds to just shove it in. So.
Well, and see, and so you didn't know this from this morning because we didn't need to talk about it, but since we are, me bringing that up is going to sound silly to you. Me bringing that up last night when we were in the middle of another task, that was me feeling like I was doing a lot to help. So like last night downstairs, we realized I need to come upstairs and get something, right? But we're in the middle of both of our time, late, focused on packing, working together. And I thought, okay, what else can I bring upstairs? Which is not a traditional Nick thought. That's something that's fairly new, right? Again, sounds simple, but I'm like, oh, hey, babe, what should I bring up from this? Like, does any of this need to be packed, or maybe I should bring the towels? And you agreed with me. So I was happy in that moment. I'm like, great, I'm helping. So I brought the towels up. Then I got to the top of the stairs and I did think, oh, should I just put these away? And then I thought, it's already late. We're both on this task. I shouldn't take extra time to do something up here, because you have communicated to me in the past that I get distracted by things and pick up little tiny projects and don't finish the first thing that I picked up. So I did appreciate the way that you said it this morning. And I now know that you'd rather me take the extra minute in that situation, even if you're participating with me in something else downstairs. But that was me listening to you. Me putting it in front of the cabinet in two different ways was me listening to you and trying.
Yeah. Yeah. The brain is wild. Just how different. Are you crying? Or tearing up? It looks like you are. I was like, okay.
No, for people who don't know, there's a very bright light bulb right here, and it's right next to Lauren's head as I'm looking at her. So I feel like I'm looking into the sun.
Because of my beauty.
Yes.
I wrote this down to bring it up because I just thought it was funny. And if you don't voice these concerns at an appropriate time, they will just snowball inside and just burst out. But I hadn't heard this phrase. I was reading the book, The Royals Next Door, which actually ended up being kind of like a steamy romance that I don't typically read steamy romances, and I didn't realize that's what it was. But they reference a guy being emotionally constipated, which I thought was just a hilarious visual. But wait, where I'm talking about with this, Nick, he's shaking his head at me for those who can't see him. Where I was taking it with this is, if you do not if I would have just not said anything about the towels, that would probably have been easier. But the next thing might have made the towels be a big thing. And so you have to just release it. Don't become emotionally constipated. And so I'm not just relating it to men. I'm saying
that makes more sense to me than when you brought this up this morning. So
no,
now
I didn't bring it up though. You were just reading the outline.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So you probably didn't know what I was going to say, but I just thought that was funny and a funny visual, because you've heard the like explosions and stuff, but I don't know. This was just funny to me.
Yeah, that's funny.
Kind of along the same lines we've been talking about the mental load. I saw it was a new to me account. She's not new, but Dr. Morgan Cutlip, she has her doctorate in psychology, and she specializes in burnout and mental load, I think is what she does. And it was a reel about, again, the mental load. She said she was at her son's, and I'll link this for you, of course, but she said she was at her son's baseball game and she overheard the dad saying to the son, "Oh, I'm so sorry, honey, your mom forgot to pack the baseball mitt." And she cringed because first of all, you could go she didn't say this part, but I'm saying this part. You could take it to our Fair Play, which if you haven't listened to The Weight of Invisible Work, part 1 and 2, go back and listen to that. But we referenced the book by Eve Rodsky, Fair Play, which is a game-changing way to look at the mental load and help your household be run. And she believes in total responsibility transfer. So this person who's taking the kid to the baseball game should be packing the bag, just because if you're just doing one of the tasks, then you often don't know all the pieces. And so you can't help out with that. So while you are helping, it's still kind of hard because there's still the mental load of making sure the uniform is washed, making sure the bag is packed, and then, taking them to the place to practice or the game. But she goes into how moms, or the primary caregiver, is rarely appreciated until they do something wrong. So she says, we can do things a million times right, and the one time we don't, like forgetting to pack the baseball glove, is when we get called out. And she's like, it's just really hard. And so it's just a reminder to appreciate the small things, which can also bring it back. We've talked several times on here that Nick and I are very specific and really try to thank each other even for the small things that we notice. So thank you for taking out the trash. It might be we actually both take out the trash, but it might be, let's say, your husband's job to take out the trash, but you notice that he did it. It's not saying like, "Oh, good job, you did so good, I'm so proud of you for doing what you're supposed to do." No, it's just like, "Oh, thanks for taking out the trash, or thank you for cooking dinner, or thank you for putting up the laundry, that type of things, just like small things. And it makes people feel appreciated. And so whenever something bigger does happen, they already feel appreciated because you can appreciate someone for doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think the being called out part I take issue with, which is the husband's fault in this scenario. Um, even if he thought, oh, my wife should have packed this, saying that to your son, you don't need to do that, right? You don't need to transfer that outward blame. That's we can talk about that a different day. I think that's bad on a lot of levels. It's pitting yourself against your spouse. It's pitting your kid against your spouse, making them think that your spouse is dumb or stupid. Like, I don't like that kind of language at all. In general. Nick, get closer to the mic. Also, I think to your point, like peppering in the little compliments that feel ridiculous probably, hopefully, makes the weight. I know you kind of already said this. Hopefully, makes the weight of the thing that I'm annoyed about way less impactful, right? Because like I do want us to be comfortable going to each other and saying like, hey, don't forget to pack the shoes when it's for this kind of a thing. They weren't in the bag this morning.
Yeah.
Like I should be frustrated at myself if I hear that and I'm the one that's supposed to pack it. I should not be frustrated with you. Now, if you come at me in anger, if you talk to my kids and tell them I'm stupid and tell them, oh, it looks like your mom didn't do this thing again. No, that's not okay.
Yeah. So how I would have probably phrased it, I'd be like, oh, shoot, we forgot to pack your.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
also, how old is this kid? Is he 7 or something? Not that that's like old, but I feel like you can also talk to little Johnny and be like, this is how we pack your bag. And we're going to pack it the night before. So we know where everything is. And if we cannot find it, we can look for it. And remember, these are the things. Maybe you make a checklist, you put it on the wall and you say, okay, mitt, cleats, hat, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's packed and ready so they know to do it. And guess what? That takes it off of your plate. And they forgot it. And it's okay to forget things. That's how you learn. Again, let them fail, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying don't bring their homework to them if they forget it at home. I mean, if they're a serial forgetter, question mark, I don't know.
They need to feel the pain.
Well,
Joke.
and I mentioned this in the book that I've read, the gift of failure, which I'll link again. And I think she took it a little too far personally than I would in my life, but I don't know. There's a line. I mentioned it. My mom would bring me my homework if I forgot it. It wasn't often, but she did. My mom would bring me a bra if I forgot one, so I didn't have to wear my sweaty sports bra all day. So I think that also makes people have a generous heart and attitude. So I don't know. There's a line. Skirt it.
Yeah, I think what you were trying to say is you like to say we, like, hey, we should remember to pack this. I like that. I think where I prefer the personal part where it's like, hey, you don't forget to do this is when we're in a system like Fair Play and we're in like probably one of the review sessions or whatever they're called, where it's like, hey, like, thank you so much for owning this thing. Don't forget to pack these. They're important. Like that is an okay statement to the person that is owning that card because that's educating on or aligning rather on the standard of care that you're both agreeing to. Right.
And this is just within the meeting. This is not like an everyday thing of reminding
No,
them.
for sure. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like it's okay to say generally like, oh, we forgot to do this. Like we've got to remember to put the cleats in the bag or whatever. But if we're in the context of those review sessions, we should be comfortable saying, hey, you need to not forget to do this when you're owning this card, or not that point, but you know what I mean? Like it's not a we in that situation. The whole point of the Fair Play system is that one person is taking the load of that card. So we should be discussing the standard of care and whether we're meeting it free of blame and free of guilt.
I think that it goes along with the lines of also the suggestion of whenever something is bothering you, saying, I feel like this versus you made me feel like, or you did this.
Yeah.
So that's just pointed language that you don't need. I also wanted to mention Dr. Morgan Cutlip, the one who's real about the baseball mitt. She actually has a book coming out September 19th, and we're recording this before September 19th. But by the time you listen to this on October 4th, it will be out. It looks really good. It's called Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself. So I don't know. I'm going to check it out. And I wanted to mention that, give her a little plug. In episode 23 and 24, the ones right before this, episode 25, we were talking about tips and etiquette for when you meet a new baby, and lots of things have changed.
Lots of things have changed in childcare over the years, is what you mean to say. Not things have changed since our episode.
Yeah. I came across this really cute TikTok channel called Ask Bubby, and she is a grandmother who's also a pediatrician. Actually, I think she says she's a pediatrician turned grandmother, which is really cute. But she gives advice in general. But the video that I came across was to other grandparents, and she's specifically saying, you know, a lot of things have changed as far as childcare goes since we had kids. And so just to be open and receptive of the way that your children want to parent their kids. But I think this is also relevant to your friends. And even if you gave birth 5 years ago, a lot of things have changed. So I just wanted to send that channel some love just because I thought it was really cute.
Yeah, to your point, especially if you're in the etiquette phase, or if you're like a grandparent, you're interested, I think this is good advice. If you're a grandparent and you're wondering why your kid is frustrated with you, I think this is a good video to watch. And it's different than the podcast we recorded about like etiquette and everything. It's more like it is a literal description of scientific findings about how things have changed, not parenting styles, not preferences, not whether your kid should be annoyed with you if you're trying to step in a way where you used to know how to raise kids. It's like very specific things, like babies used to be told they should sleep on their stomach. Now they should sleep on their back. Like we used to be okay with this thing scientifically as a medical community. Now we're not. So it's coming at that disconnection from a point of objectivity as opposed to a point of subjectivity. I think that's a different perspective than you and I actually gave in the podcast, and it's different from the etiquette piece. But, you know, it's good to recognize that things are just different and you are not in the way or doing anything wrong, but you may need to adapt. Like if you were having a baby today, you would raise it differently than you did 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was really cute. While we're going backwards in episodes, I wanted to mention episode 19, comparisonitis, because I thought about it this weekend. We took Cypress, our son, to go get his haircut for the first time, and Nick and I basically bawled in the salon. However, we didn't get our daughter Olive's haircut, and they're twins. And in my head, I was thinking, should we get her haircut? We're getting Cypress's haircut, but she doesn't need a haircut right now. And that's something we talk about in comparisonitis. I think it's a good episode, regardless of if you have kids or if you're married or single or whatever. I think it's a good episode to think about just because comparison affects us all. But something that we discuss within that episode, you know, is between kids. And I referenced the book, and that siblings without rivalries, I think, is really good. And one of the things that it talks about in that is just like, you don't make stuff for your kids equal. You give them what they need, and trying to make it equal, you oftentimes will fuel rivalry between them, because then they expect things to be equal. And then it's like a fight, not even a game, because the games are fun for the most part, but a fight to see which one is better and things like that. So we didn't get, my whole point in saying that is, one, milestone, Cypress's first haircut, but then also we didn't get one from our daughter because she doesn't need one. So we're doing what our children need, not making it 100% equal.
To me, that speaks a little bit to what we should do as adults, in my opinion, too, is pursue quality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. Right? So like,
I like it.
Do both kids need their haircut right now? No. Should they both have the opportunity to get their haircut when they need to? Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're going to do.
Check. I approve. Mom approved. If you're new here, welcome. But every week we have a TIFF. Sometimes it's friendly, sometimes it's not so friendly. And I didn't pick today's, but before we do today's, I wanted to talk about the TIFF from episode 21, I think it was. And I said, do you put things down or do you put it away? And Nick basically said he does put things away, and then accused me of just standing in front of the fridge. But Nick drinks milk, and no, he's not a serial killer, but he drinks milk. And sometimes he will stand in front of the fridge, leave it open, and drink out of the carton. And I caught him doing that, which I've seen him do it before, but I hadn't seen him do it after our TIFF. And I was like, dude, you're standing with the fridge open and you accuse me of being a serial fridge opener. So I just wanted to say that Nick keeps the fridge door open. Now, Nick is in charge of today's TIFF, so...
Yeah, it's funny how you just moved on and didn't want me to respond to that. So yeah, I do. I guess the world knows I drink out of the milk jug now, which is great. So I've probably lost some friends. But for those who are still here, yes, I do open the fridge when I need to get something out of the fridge. For the total time, including the drink, it was maybe open for 10 seconds. Your pattern that we discussed recently is like a minute or longer.
No,
Yes,
absolutely
it is.
not.
It is. You are quite literally on the other side of the kitchen and the door is wide open.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, well, we're
Let's
going to
move
have
on.
a video section of the next podcast where I have evidence.
Okay.
You brought it up.
Cool. What's the tip for today, Nick?
What is the tip? Let me think. I'm just kidding. I know what it is. The name of today's tip is water on the counter. Do I need to describe it?
No. Go ahead. You have the floor.
So there's a few different ways to get water on the counter. There's many different ways, really, if you want to dissect it. But the two main ones that I can think of are, I've used the sink, I've used the countertop, I've chopped things, I've rinsed things off, and there's residue, there's water, there's bits of things, whatever, specifically in the kitchen, or makeup if you're in the kitchen, right? Or in the bathroom. And there's also, I've washed my hands and water has spilt up behind the sink. Those are the two big problems here. And I think they're not problems by themselves, but they are when they're completely and consistently ignored. So
It's just
I'm
water.
not only criticizing that you leave water on the counter. I'm actually telling you this as a message from yourself, because you typically get upset when you put non-kitchen or non-bathroom things on the counters and they get water, residue, or dirt on them because that's what's on the counter. So that's my tip. And it's not with the intent to fight. Future Lauren wants past Lauren to help.
So are you saying you don't leave water on the counter?
No, I'm saying when I notice I clean it up.
You just leave beard hairs on the counter.
Okay, hold on. I don't think we should just go back and forth because I'm not blaming you for something. If we're going to have a funny TIFF conversation,
Yeah.
I'm bringing something up. We should talk about that thing.
Sure. I can say that, yeah, sometimes I leave water on the counter because it doesn't bother me.
So I don't understand why it doesn't bother you because I just told you that it does, and not from it does bother me. I am annoyed by it, but you are also equally annoyed by it. Sometimes you get really mad. Like putting clothes on the kitchen counter, which I don't think should ever happen, is just a weird preference of mine. It's just a weird preference of mine and not something worth discussing. But you like to do that. It's fine that you like to do that. But when you do that frequently, those clothes get dirty and you get mad about the stains and stuff that get on those clothes because you've put them on the kitchen. I don't think that our kitchen counters should ever be dirty enough for that to be a problem. So I'm asking for you to help me there.
Okay. I think that water and stuff that makes clothes dirty are different, but I hear you and I can be better about it. You've never outright asked me. There was a time when there was water on our counter in the bathroom and you thought it was me, but it actually was just our faucet leaking. That equally annoyed me because it would get my phone wet when I would set it down there. But I can be better about it.
We have talked about this a few times. It's okay that you don't remember. I think that my request, to the spirit of our earlier conversation about incremental change and incremental improvement, my request is that you just try and look. That's it. Just look. It doesn't matter if it's your fault. It doesn't matter if it's a leaky faucet. The problem is that there's water or dirt or something on the counters and it needs to be removed.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you. That's different than the tip. Water on the counter, sure. Dirt, different.
No. So I'm saying any residue. So like in the bathroom, it's makeup, beard hair would qualify to call myself out. It would be anything, right? Our counter should always be clean. That's what I'm trying to say. So
I can get behind it.
In the kitchen, it's the cucumber you just shredded or zucchini you just shredded, the cheese you just cut, whatever you just did. I mean, I like to use spoon rests. You don't like to use spoon rests. There's stuff on the counter all the time. It's fine. We're using our surfaces. I'm not criticizing us for getting things dirty. I'm saying we need to clean. When it's time to clean, we need to clean. You're very good at cleaning the whole kitchen and the whole bathroom. You don't pay attention to the counters.
Okay. Sometimes I try, but I can try better. But you made me laugh when you said cucumber and then you meant zucchini because I don't know if you've ever done it, but I have multiple times accidentally purchased
Oh yeah,
a
I've done
cucumber
this.
instead of a zucchini, which is very different for the recipe. But
Yeah.
anyway, I can get behind it and I can try to wipe down the counters better,
Does this
more.
tip surprise you?
No, no. Okay, we've talked enough about other things, but
Yes.
let's get into the episode. I do think that it is relevant to today's episode, but I understand you're here. You want to talk about the Supermom myth, so let's do it. This is actually going to be our first episode in October. We're recording this before we leave for London tomorrow. And actually, I think maybe I should save this for the actual 6-month mark, but in October, we will have been doing this for 6 months, which just feels wild to me. And I thought this would be a good time to do this episode. I initially had it marked right after. Ooh, let me look. Hold on. I don't actually remember which one I had it marked under or after. It could have been after the mental load one, but I think it was before that. It doesn't matter. Maybe it was right after comparisonitis, or perhaps it was boys are from Mars, girls are from Venus, and I wanted a little bit of a difference. But either way, I thought this episode would be good to discuss right now because it is October, and I feel like once we hit October, it is a downward spiral for the rest of the year. Not in a bad way. I know that has a negative connotation, but just downhill rather, because it's, for us at least, we have the twins' birthday, and then we have Nick's birthday, and then it's Thanksgiving, and then it's my dad's birthday, and then it's Christmas. It's just a lot. And there's holiday parties and friendsgivings and things like that. So there's a lot going on, and that means there's typically stress and burnout. And not just for moms. Again, the bulk of this I think is moms, but really parents in general, primary caregivers, but also people in general are just stressed at this point of the year, even though it's a very fun time. And to go along with the Supermom myth to kind of kick the show off, it made me, when I picked this title, it makes me think about the memes and stuff that I've seen where I should find one, but it's like moms are saying, we could use some help. And people just respond with like, you're doing great. You're a Supermom. You're amazing. And the moms are like, but I could really use some help. And then the response is, here's a pizza party. And it makes me think of when companies would be like, we want to reward you for all your good work, so we're having a pizza party. And then, it's just crickets because we don't actually want a pizza party. Like, if you're going to buy us food, buy us something different than pizza. I love pizza. Don't get me wrong. I just don't always want pizza. It makes my stomach hurt. But I do like pizza. And moms don't want a pizza party. They want help. Yes, Nick.
I won't give anything away, but for those of us who have seen Severance, this reminds me of Severance.
Yeah. Good movie. Okay, and then also, show. Wow. I don't even know what I am. Another way to think about this that just came to my head, because I think in songs, I love musical theater. I did musical theater, was the song from 2000. Wait, close your eyes. It's back in 2001 and you're watching TV, Disney Channel specifically, and Crystal Harris comes on and she's sitting on the piano and she's singing I'm Supergirl. I'm Supergirl and I'm here to save the world. Anyway, the next line is, but I want to know who's going to save me. And I feel like that relates to moms. They're out here saving everybody and they're looking around saying, who's going to save me?
Good job. Really good job.
What do you mean?
That was supposed to be funny because you said when I asked for help, and the joke didn't
thanks.
land.
Yeah,
We'll cut
okay,
that too.
I get it. The other song that may be more relevant if you don't remember that song from 2001 is Surface Pressure from Encanto. And it's actually an alto song, which is what I am, but I'm not going to sing it for you. I'm just going to read the lyrics. I think it's so, what word am I looking for? Poignant? I don't know. It's just relevant is what I will say. And I'm a lyric person. I've had this conversation with multiple people that, again, this could be my serial killer trait, I suppose, of I will go and read the lyrics. Like, I remember I read, you buy the CDs and they have like the inside pamphlet and it has all of the lyrics. I would read every single one. And this was before Taylor Swift did the little Easter eggs in all of her pamphlets. So anyway, to this day, I will go read the lyrics when someone drops a new album. So the lyrics are, I'm the strong one. I'm not nervous. I'm as tough as the crust of the earth is. I move mountains. I move churches, and I glow because I know what my worth is. I don't ask how hard the work is. Got a rough, indestructible surface. Diamonds and platinum, I find them, I flatten them. I take what I'm handed, I break what's demanded. But under the surface, I feel berserk as a tightrope walker in a three-ring circus. Under the surface, was Hercules ever like, yo, I don't want to fight Cerberus? Did I say that right? I don't know. Under the surface, I'm pretty sure I'm worthless if I can't be of service. A flaw or a crack, the straw in the stack that breaks the camel's back. What breaks the camel's back? Anyway, it's not one of like the most popular songs I think from the Encanto, which that definitely went viral because they do have good songs in it. But I think it was the most relevant to me because I often feel like if I'm not of service, I'm worthless, or I'm not worthy of being friends with you. This isn't even just mom related, this is friends related. And so I wanted to bring that too because I think that some moms, a lot of moms feel that way.
I would say that you hold yourself to the standard that you think everybody is holding you to. And you also hold your friends and family to the same standard that you don't want to be held to.
Yeah.
Not trying to insult you. Just
I don't.
It matches with the song you're talking about.
I don't think you're trying to insult me. I think it's the truth. And like my professor told me, the truth only hurts when it has to.
Don't like that expression.
I know. The point that I bring that up and also why I appreciate you saying that is because this episode was sparked by my own life. And honestly, a lot of things that we talk about, blog related, anything like that, are sparked from my own life because maybe I want to talk to somebody about it or I have a question and I think other people would enjoy it too. But I've always been told or described as the girl who can do it all. And becoming a mom was the first time I felt like I couldn't do it all. And maybe that had to do with twins. I often see people with one baby and think, yeah, I could do that too if I just had one, or perhaps if I had two that were different ages. And it's not that I don't want or love the twins, it's just that motherhood has been a major adjustment in my previously very efficient life. And I just want people to know that you can be a super mom without feeling the weight of having to be super mom. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's the expectation thing, right?
Yeah.
It is possible to be a super mom and still not feel like you're meeting your own expectations of what that means.
And by breaking it down, what I mean is you can be a good mom. You can be a super mom, but you don't have to be like super mom, Wonder Woman. If anytime, but the whole time you don't have to be that, right? You're a person and you deserve to not have to feel the weight of that. And I also wanted to address this because I often get messages. Usually it's when I share something where it's just me and the twins alone. And I get messages saying that I'm a super mom. And I always accept them because I know what people are saying. Like, I say, thank you, I appreciate it, but I am quick to say that I'm not. Mainly because it's a lot of pressure to be super mom. And I also don't want to be a reason that someone doesn't feel like a super mom, right? There's a lot of comparison that the internet causes, I think, or directly, indirectly, whatever you want to say. And I don't want to be the reason that someone feels like they aren't doing a good job because I have my own struggles. I just don't put them on Instagram. I'm honest. I talk about things, but I'm not going to show me, having a breakdown for the most part. There are sometimes I think I've shared certain things, but it's never in the moment. It's more like after the fact when I've gone over the wave. And yeah.
So, true or false, seeing a post or something where another mom or another woman is doing what you feel like is a lot more than you, does that make you feel bad?
Occasionally. It depends on my mindset, but yeah, it does.
Do you blame that mom for making you feel that way?
No, I blame myself, which again is more in the downward spiral.
So you just said you don't want to make people feel that way. So what if you heard the people who are listening to your posts say that same thing to you?
Say what?
So they see you doing everything. And if they were asked, do you blame Lauren for your feelings about not being enough? They would say no. Just like you said no to the people who make you feel bad. Or rather, to the people whose content has caused you to feel bad about yourself. even
Yeah.
though they weren't trying to.
Yeah, I know it's a me problem, but I know that it's a
No, no,
me
no. It's
problem.
not a you problem. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm
Hold
sorry to
on, let
interrupt
me
you.
finish that. It's a me problem, but I know it's a me problem that a lot of people have, so that's why I wanted to bring it up.
You're going to say I'm nitpicky. If you say something's a me problem, you're blaming yourself for it, and I don't accept that.
But it could also mean that I need to work on it. Blame is a hard word. So, like, I'm the one who can fix it, right? Is what I'm trying to say, I guess, which is the more
Fair.
positive turn.
Something you can work on. Fair. Fair.
Yeah. We've talked about it before, but I'm going to bring it up again today. The Tush Baby. The Tush Baby is a seat that straps around your waist for your child. And they just launched a new product called the Snug. And it fits around your baby, so you can use the Tush Baby hands-free, which is really cool because it has an ergonomical, that's probably not the right word, but an ergonomic seat for your kids so they sit differently. And then also their weight is evenly distributed. And I have scoliosis, I have a lot of back pain, and it just helps me hold my children better. And now I can do it without any hands. So really cool. And you can try it out with code BGMAD for 15% off.
Yeah, these things are awesome. They're marketed towards moms, but I like it a lot. It's really good when your kid's like over 25 pounds. It takes a lot of pressure off holding them, especially when they want to be held. It's nice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually really sad that we don't have the new product you just referenced
I know.
before our trip.
Whenever you listen to this, we'll be back from our trip, but I wish that they would have come out with the Snug prior to it because I think it'll be so clutch for Europe.
I'm just going to manifest that they send us one to one of our hotels. So maybe you can send them that information and we'll see.
We'll see.
Maybe we can buy one and get it expedited.
I don't even know if they do international shipping, but we'll look at it.
Well, you definitely won't know if we don't ask.
That's true. We'll try it out. You try it out. Let us know what you think and use code
BGMAD
for 15% off. And a statistic I wanted to bring into this that I'll link in the show notes for you, of course, are that moms are more anxious than dads. Not that you needed a study to tell you that, but, it's not just like safety and things like that. It's also moms fear they aren't good enough. And, social media kind of causes that sometimes. But then also, if you already have underlying anxiety, that can cause that. And mothers are also more likely to say that they feel judged for parenting decisions. And I just don't think guys feel that way. I think it's also different, like how our brains work and how we interact with society, but also moms are less likely to ask for help. And I just don't feel like guys are like that. They'll be very direct and say, if they need help, they'll ask for it. Now, if it's directions or trying to prove that they're a man or they're strong or something, maybe they won't ingest or maybe they won't not ingest. But when I don't not ask for help because I think it's a weakness. I don't because sometimes I think not you, but collective you won't be able to do it as good as me. And I want it to be done the best.
Well, if I may get into your brain, you also expect people to help you. You don't like to ask for help.
I'd say like my direct family is very good with the executive functioning factor in our brains. And so a lot of us will do things for each other without having to ask for help. So that I'm not, you're right. I do like it when people just think about it because I think about it and I kind of expect people to treat me how I treat them. So that's valid. But I also know that I'm not asking for help because I think it's a sign of weakness.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm trying to delineate is that you don't refuse to accept help.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
But also I know I said a lot in that. Does it surprise you that women are more anxious than men or that they feel judged for parenting decisions more than men?
I don't know that I have seen things to agree that women are more anxious than men. The second part, I can understand. I think like, I don't know. I don't really have a perspective on that yet. Because no, I don't frankly care about how other people perceive the way that we're raising our kids. I'm very interested in feedback and how other people are, but I don't at all feel judged. I don't feel guilty about what my kid's doing that you don't like, but I'm also very early in this journey. That's why I'm saying I don't really have a perspective on it yet. The anxiety piece, Well, can you further clarify what you're asking there? Like the anxiety, are you saying anxiety around feeling like they can't do it all or they aren't a good parent or what
Yeah.
specifically?
Also about like safety. So they're worried about, their kid falling or getting hurt, or they don't want to plant things in people's minds, but the like
Oh,
safety pieces too.
I mean, I don't want to generalize and talk about all men, but like I think I am much more comfortable with failure and perceived failure than you are in
What
general.
about hurt though, where it physically hurts them? That's what the safety feature is, or the
Well,
safety evidence
what
says.
I'm saying is I'm not worried about like them tripping and falling as much as I think you are. I'm not saying I won't protect them. That's a different
Yeah.
thing. But like I don't. I'm connecting it to anxiety. I don't have anxiety that things are going to happen to them or they're going to be detrimentally
Intrusive
injured or
thoughts.
something. I don't have. Well, I mean, I have intrusive thoughts, but not around that. Like I don't. I'm not
Mm,
worried. I don't have anxious thoughts around that.
yeah.
Around the safety thing.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? I feel like I'm like
Yeah.
disconnected with your
No, no,
question.
no. No, I think it does. And I think it proves the point. Not that there was a point to prove, but just like how I think men's brain are just differently. And I'm very much in a rabbit hole of reading parenting books specifically for boys and girls just because brains are different. And so the one I'm finally trying to finish is called Boys Adrift. It's by Leonard Sachs. I've read, this will be the fourth book I read of his. I've read, I think, four of his books. I'm not sure if there's more, but I've read The Collapse of Parenting, Why Gender Matters, Girls on the Edge, and then Boys Adrift, which is what I'm in right now. And it's obviously about how boys' brains work. And I've learned this before, but I always love new ideas or points about it. The other ones I've read are Decoding Boys and then Boys and Sex. Anyway, uh, you know, this is the point where I was going to bring up the marriage thing about how guys still think it's a good idea to get married and more women are saying it's not as pertinent for them. And because a lot of the guys aren't as proactive, and one of the examples that it said in the book, which I don't necessarily agree with, Nick, but it was I laughed out loud. But a guy asked his wife, "Why did the nanny get a better Christmas present than I did?" And she was said, "Because she helps me more and is more," yeah, something along the lines of that. But this is where the point that I already said about better to stay single than get married, and that divorces are happening, and the woman's life doesn't really change per se, but the guy's does because he kind of his eyes are open to all the work. So, yeah.
That's funny, and I don't even want to analyze it because it's just hilarious from both parties.
Yeah.
So I think you didn't ask me this, but like, do I think that guys have as much anxiety about the safety of their kid? Probably not. I think there's a few exceptions to that where like, if we're like in a crowd, um, or in a situation that could be dangerous to the kid outside of something they're doing, I'm aware.
Yeah, like
Like,
crossing the street and things like that.
well, if you want a specific, you're not wrong. If you want a more specific example, we're about to leave for our trip. Um, uh, okay, I'll give you a more specific example. Sorry. In the context of our trip, I'm talking to my work people yesterday in a meeting, and my boss says, "Hey, you should really like, you're gonna get pickpocketed. You need to prepare for that. Make sure you've got, your belt bag things. Make sure they're like," he talked about the zip tie strap, all these different things. And what I told him, which I think is telling to how I'm thinking in your question, I said, "Yeah, that's a great point. You're right. We're paying attention to that. I'm more focused on making sure that our kids don't get pickpocketed from us." And he was like, "Wow, that's actually really smart that you should think about that first." I was like, "I'm not forgetting or like, you're right." But that's a window, right? So like, I'm very excited about the trip. If there's one thing I'm afraid of, it's watching them around a crowd, especially a crowd. I mean, I'm not going to say Europe's unsafe. That's not my point. But like anywhere that's not my comfortable home environment, I'm paying attention.
Yeah.
Like we don't have to get into this subject, but like there was a video that I intentionally did not send you. Not
But now
from
you're going to tell me about it.
Well, you still don't need to see it. And if it comes across, I'm going to be sad that you saw it. It wasn't where we're going. Completely different, much more dangerous place that I won't say where it is. But they're at a restaurant outside, mom, like maybe a grandma or something, and a kid, like a toddler. And this guy jumps over the fence and just in broad daylight tries to take the kid. and mom and grandma go into mama bear mode, that there's a guy who like runs in from the next table and the situation is taken care of, the kid was safe, everything was okay. But if there's stuff I have anxiety over, it's that. I'm not worried about Cypress and Olive falling. I'm not worried about, it's scary when they fall out of their cribs and they're trying to climb, which is happening to us right now. Obviously, I don't want them to get hurt. I'm much less worried about that, and I don't have anxiety about that. I have anxiety about somebody else
Yeah.
harming them.
Yeah.
So
Valid.
yeah. And the other thing is separate and much not as dark. I think if there's something else I have anxiety over, it's probably not the right word as anxiety, just like, I don't know what the right word is. I'm self-critical about it. It's like, it's not that I care that other people are judging me or are wondering if I'm being a good parent. I just have a heavy expectation that the task in front of me, I can complete.
Yeah.
Not that I can do enough, or not that I am perceived as being able to do enough, but like changing the cribs to the next stage, I expect myself to be able to do it. You know, like I also have an unreasonable, like I expect myself to be able to build a crib. I'm not a craftsman. You know, like I think that's part of a guy plight of like, it's not the weight of everything and it's not the perception. It's, I can do it. If I was in a zombie apocalypse and I had to take care of my family, I could do it.
Yeah,
You know what I
and
mean?
I think that just again fits to how the women's brain and men's brains are wired differently, and it's super fascinating. I would really encourage you learning about it because I think it's interesting whether you have kids or not. So anyway, great points. I think that where it's different for moms is they're often thinking about those things plus a billion others. And just because,
Sure.
you know, they're multitasking their brain doesn't mean that it's better, but we have so many tabs open that we're shutting down. Like, meow, blue screen of death or something like that. But we don't want to be that way, but we feel like we have to have all tabs, and it's really hard to turn your brain off or close the tabs. And I think that's where, you know, the supermom problem is hard, just because it's like you're holding it here, but you're also sinking. And if you don't do it, who will? I'm not saying someone won't, but if they don't know about it, then how can they do it?
Yeah, I get that. I think it might surprise you to know that I feel like I have a ton of tabs open all the time as well. But the weight of not getting enough of them done does not crush me. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to say I'm better in any way. I'm just saying like there are negative impacts to me letting those things fall through the cracks, as you know. I'm not saying that's better, but I share that piece of the mental load, but I don't get crushed by my own
Yeah.
expectations of what I'm able to do.
And I think that is a stereotypical, not in a bad way, but the dad brain. And it's mentioned in the book Fair Play. Like that's how it opens, is about we mentioned it before, but they're on an airplane and the moms are like just looking at the dad who's peacefully working, and that's all he's doing, and that's all he has to think about. And they're thinking about getting the air conditioning changed and everything else. And it's just hard. Aside for asking for help, when we were just talking about women have more trouble asking for help than men, another thing that they often struggle with the guilt with that is the mom guilt, the super mom guilt, is that they aren't giving their kids the absolute best or perfect life or whatever they may see on Instagram or around them in their neighborhood. And I just want to say that, first of all, if you're doing the best you can with what you have, then you're doing a great job. But you might think it would be best for your children to have the quote perfect life, but that actually gives them unhealthy expectations that you are passing down to them, that things have to be perfect in order to be enjoyed. Or even if we want to go back to asking for help, if you think that asking for help is a weakness, then they may not want to ask for help when help is absolutely necessary to live life. And so I just wanted to say that, because your guilt is valid, but I don't want you to feel that way. And I also want you to know it's better when you don't for your kids.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a ton to add because I agree. I think that I have a big problem with the expectation of perfection. I've already kind of talked about it earlier, but I think it just applies here as well. Like if you're so worried that you're not perfect, you're probably giving like a frustrated version of yourself to your kids, you know, like, which is kind of manifesting the problem you're trying to avoid. Like your goal should not be being the perfect parent. I just don't agree with that. And to be clear, I'm not saying that against anybody because I don't think people are intentionally trying to do that. But like, if you're worried that you're not giving the best version of you and the best version of you as a parent to your kids at every single moment, I'm sorry, but you won't. It's
Yeah.
not a reasonable expectation.
Yeah.
I can appreciate it from the perspective of you're trying to pay attention to it. The bad mom or the bad dad, don't worry about whether they're being good. I get that. Let's focus on improvement. But I think the North Star isn't perfection. The North Star and the goal is the pursuit of improvement.
Yeah. The pursuit of perfection. No, just kidding.
I mean, that does apply too, right? Because like, if you know you're never going to get there, I know you were joking, but like, if you know you're never going to get there and you still try to, that's okay. Just release the resentment and the shame from not being some attainable thing, you
Yeah.
know?
So something that I feel bad about sometimes that could be under that same vein of like perfection. Not really, but I just want to say it's a different aspect of it. So it's not like, oh, I don't have the perfect snacks or, you know, structured play or unstructured play for the twins. It's more so something that I struggle with a lot is that I'm not able to focus on just one of them. I have two of them to focus on. And so I end up missing stuff. And I don't know that we'll experience another, newborn phase. And so I felt really alone in this as a twin mom. But I was talking to a friend who was pregnant with her second at the time, and she not only validated my feelings but understood. And it's really hard to be understood as a twin mom just because it's just a very different life. But she said, I'm worried about missing my first child's firsts and milestones and attention with my second child coming. And I was like, it's not that different than me because I'm focusing on two, and sure, I didn't get to quote enjoy it, focus on like all the things that are happening because my head basically I have to have two heads or eyes on the side of my head like a shark.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know, that's just something that I've struggled with, and you might find that something you struggle with, that person you're comparing to is struggling with something very similar, and it may not look like it because you're looking at one thing, but they could be looking at you and thinking the same thing about something, a difference that y'all have.
What's interesting about what you just said too is like your understanding is that you're at a bit of a disadvantage in your initial assessment of your twin situation because you're not able to see the first right in either one, or you're missing things when you're with the other one. But like you also said, okay, the people who have multiple kids go through this as well. And I don't have the numbers in front of you, but my understanding is that people who have one kid are in the minority, and most families have multiple, I think. Again, prove me wrong. But if that's the case, then most parents are feeling what you're feeling, just at a different time, to your point.
Yeah, a different way,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah.
Again, that brings us together, not divides us.
Right. Yeah.
So this conversation happened over text. So, technology is great. Social media is great, but it can also be bad as far as comparison goes. That was the reason the question that we answered the other week about not having the quote dream house with the perfectly wallpapered nursery and things like that and feeling guilty about that. You have the Pinterest now and Pinterest moms and seeing everything, and everyone's posting the highlights and they're performing, but it's really exhausting, and maintaining the front, especially if it's more of a performance that you think maybe you have to give, is worse for you and it's worse for others. And again, where I don't feel like a bad mom, but I wish I could do more for them is a lot of the things I see, whether it's crafts or food or I don't know, outings, like something as simple as swimming lessons. I also cannot relate to having twins. And I think again, this is something that people with multiple children have regardless of if they're twins, but I can't go to a swimming class by myself because I can't be with both of them at the same time. I haven't tried a gymnastics class by myself that's a mommy and me. There are just certain things that where parent participation is required that it's hard, or if I were to do the craft that I see, it would be really hard to keep the eye on them that they need for it. And I don't know, social media is great because it does give you a lot of ideas, especially, if you can't buy the Love Every Play sets, there's a lot of things that you can do just with the cardboard box and popsicle sticks. So it's so good and can be so bad at the same time. And so I just wanted to keep that in mind.
If I could bring up a real world example, we recently met a family who is able financially and from a time perspective, able to get their kids into every class that's available in the city. Did you feel comparison and disadvantage there?
Oh yeah.
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 I'm
I
just saying,
did.
I know it happened. I felt a little bit of that too, to be clear. I'm not trying to say that's a bad feeling that you had. That's the one that came up when you were describing this. In the last point, and it's relevant to this point too, I mentioned uh, how more people are feeling this than your brain lets you believe.
Mm-hmm.
My point in that is not to say that it's a ridiculous or invalid feeling. My point is to say you're not uniquely disadvantaged. So,
Said another way, you're not alone.
sure, that's a good one too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because like a lot of that pressure, based on my understanding, right, is like, oh, everybody else can do that and I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Or to your point about the twins, like everybody who doesn't have twins, they don't have to worry about this and I do. This is just another thing for me. Well, it's not.
Also, 20s, if you're listening to this, we love having you and we wouldn't change it.
Is it bad to say I prefer it?
No?
I mean, it's the only situation I know, so I don't have
Yeah.
enough data. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. And I could not imagine not having twins.
Yeah. Me neither. So, all that to say is that we both have struggles in parenting and feeling like we have to be always on and doing the best, having the best classes, paying for the classes, doing the craft, doing the sensory box, having them, help us cook and things like that. And I actually posted this on my personal stories the other day of, you know, I do post them, helping me cook and things like that. But sometimes it's not a good time for it. And that's okay. You can be in the middle. You don't have to be always, making cookies with them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's time for slice and bake, or sometimes they need to watch Miss Rachel while I make the cookies. It just read the room,
There's
read your
nothing
own
against Miss
room.
Rachel. We love Miss Rachel. It's
Oh, we
nothing
love Miss
against Miss
Rachel.
Rachel.
Yeah. My whole point in saying that is those are our struggles, and we assume that you have similar struggles. And we just wanted to talk a little bit of how to overcome these or how to begin to overcome these. So, the first thing that I would say is if you're on social media, be mindful of it. Be mindful of the hours you're spending on it. What are you looking at? What are the feelings you have whenever you are seeing the people that you follow? Do they make you feel bad? It's not their fault, but if they make you feel bad, mute, block, unfollow. You may not be in a space where you can be looking at that right now, and that's okay. Be aware of it and change it.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I would say is to tell someone. Just get it out of your brain. Get it out of you feeling alone and in a corner by yourself on an island. That's a great step. And if you don't have someone to say it to, say it out loud. Just get it out of your brain, get it vocalized, and then it starts to diminish. At least in my experience, it does.
Yeah, and I think something worthy of saying is like it is possible that you are dealing with something fairly unique.
Yeah.
But I think it is still good advice to enter into conversation about that with somebody, especially somebody you trust that's able to listen to you and just be there, like, because I mean, the twin thing we're talking about is not unique. A lot of people have multiple kids, but like maybe you do have a very unique situation. Just because other people don't share it doesn't mean you need to keep it locked up.
Yeah. And so when you're telling somebody, try telling another mom. I think that it's important to have mom relationships because they are people who relate to you. I wouldn't say make all your friends moms, but I think you do need at least some little bit of a mom group or person that you can talk to and be relatable because it can be such an isolating time. We discussed this in episode 10, Do Mom Friends Exist IRL in real life, and gave some tips and tricks on how to find mom friends because we do know that it's hard. There are other things you can do if you can't find somebody online. There's the Peanut app, which is basically like online dating for moms. But like I mentioned, if I hadn't have said it to my friend and opened up about missing twins points, she wouldn't have been able to open up and tell me that she was actually worried about that. So in a way, we helped each other because I felt not so alone and validated. And then she was able to get that off her chest. So I think a mom community, even if it's just texting, is important.
Well, it's also cool that like your pursuit of help was able to help the
Mhm.
other person. You kind of said that, but I'm just directly saying it. Like it feels vulnerable and weird and selfish to reach out and be like, hey, I got to talk to you about this thing that's really bothering me. But you actually could be stepping in to help somebody.
Mhm.
So if you're holding it back, you may not only be hurting yourself, you may not be creating the opportunity to help that other person as well.
Right. And it could create a lifeline later on if they don't automatically understand or have experienced something similar,
Yeah, that's good.
it's a lifeline for later on whenever they might feel that way. But speaking of getting help,
Another good piece of how to overcome is to let people help. I also
how to
wrote,
overcome the supermom complex, if you will. Just clarifying.
yeah. So another way to overcome the supermom or superdad complex is to let people help. I also wrote get help, which I'll get to in a second, but let people help goes back to if you have help offered to you, and if you don't think you do, you probably do. Think about it and look at your messages and listen to your conversations. Let people help. If they can't help you the way they're offering to, ask them to do something else. Don't feel uncomfortable about that. Let them help you. Them taking things off of your plate, even if it's not perfect, will clear parts of your plate and allow you to do more things. Get help is my way of connecting this situation to the business world a little bit. So like there's this rule in entrepreneurship where if you can find someone to do something 75 or 80% as well as you do, or as fast as you do, it's worthy of paying them if you have the funds to do it.
Oh, so you're talking about delegating. I definitely thought you were going to talk about therapy.
No, I'm talking, well, I mean, that's good too, but I'm talking about, it's not really delegating. I'm saying get the help. Like if, for example, if laundry is taking way too much of your time based on your perspective of your own time, you're not able to spend as much time with your kids as you want to, and it's frustrating to you. Yeah, it's going to suck to release the control, and a service may not do it as well as you would do it and exactly perfect. But if you have the resources to do it, clear that off your plate.
Oh, to me, that's delegating the laundry to the service.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I'm caught up in the definition of that word. Delegate
Okay.
to me is to somebody that you manage. But I understand what you're saying. We don't have to use that in the podcast. Yeah, delegate works. I think the point is like, if you are feeling like your plate is too full, it's good to talk about it, but also you can take some proactive steps to try and clear your plate, right? You don't have to like feeling like you have to be a supermom could also be an indicator that you just have too many things going on and you're not able to prioritize the things that you actually want to be present for. So either let people help you do them or find the people to either ask or pay to do your things. I think this also goes back to like, let's use the supermom example with laundry, right? If you're frustrated that every time your husband tries to help and does laundry, he doesn't do it exactly the way you're doing it, you can still let him do it. He can get better. He can change how he's doing it, but your way of doing it isn't perfect. That's just your expectation. So if you're holding on to it, maybe they can do it 80, 85% as well or as quickly as you can, but that takes 100% of the effort and work off of your plate if you allow them to. Let
Yeah,
people
the
help.
thing that's in the back of my head is, does he do it well enough to not ruin the clothes? Because if the clothes are ruined, then that actually makes more work for me and I have to go buy new clothes. But I get that's not what you're saying, but I'm telling you, letting you into my brain, that's what I'm thinking about.
So I hear you. That to me is a reason in your own brain to hold on to the task yourself.
Yeah, I'm
And
not
my challenge,
shy about it.
yeah, if we're so minimum standard of care applies here as well, right? In the same way that your spouse can improve how they're doing something to meet your collective minimum standard of care, your perfect expectation of how something should get done needs to be lowered for somebody else to own that task. Minimum standard of care means, I'm not condescending, I'm saying actually to define it, it's the lowest bar for which we think this thing is done. It's not the perfect bar for which it's completed. Right?
Sure. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's hard for me. I think I have really high bars. So it's really hard for me sometimes.
That's exactly what I'm communicating, is
Okay.
that those high bars are getting in your way.
I'm just saying that it's hard for me to get there. That's all I'm saying. I'm not
Do you
disagreeing with
disagree
you.
with the recommendation?
Partially because I'm not there yet. And that's okay.
Sure. And by no means did I say that you have to offload everything. It's just if you're feeling like you can't do it and you're talking to people about it and you're still not getting anywhere, you
Yeah.
have to make changes.
Yeah. Take action. I get it.
Yeah.
The last way that we would recommend to kind of overcome this complex issue is to find out what you like, to do what works for you. Everyone is different. Like, just like I've talked about, different diets for different bodies. I have ulcerative colitis. Some people say, yeah, eat a raw vegetable diet. And my body does not do well with raw vegetables. And so something can be recommended for some family that doesn't work for yours. And I actually listened to Big Little Feelings just released a podcast, and their first episode was on moms in crisis, and they were both talking about they're very different people. And so one of them enjoys to cook, and the night before I'd spent time, cooking with her family as like a whole. And the other one said, I could not in a million years want to do that. That's very stressful, would not be fun for me. One of them does really structured crafts. And the other one says, I always feel bad when you post the crafts because I don't have a lot of structured play for them. And the other mom said, well, when you post your kid in the sandbox, I feel like a horrible mom because I don't let them play in sand because that's really annoying to mess with for me. And so here they were, both great moms, but both jealous or felt comparison and felt bad for not doing what the other one did when they both just need to do with what's right for their family. And I did like the episode. It's not safe for work, but I did enjoy listening to it because I think it validates a lot of feelings. So my point is, just to wrap it up, and that is that do what you can with what you have and what's best for your family.
And also be proud of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that will also combat the comparison or supermom complex
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. It's not look at all I didn't do. It's look at all I did. Yeah.
I like that. I like that. All right. Now we have some kind of seemingly random things to talk about, but I really like them. And so I thought you would too. A hot topic right now is, or for the past several years, is gentle parenting. But what most people mean by gentle parenting is actually authoritative parenting. And I have a TikTok video that I will link here that kind of discusses that more in depth, but basically firm but kind. And that's kind of like the authoritative parenting mindset, and that kids need to learn how to say no. Whereas a lot of gentle parenting these days you see is like they basically let their kids run the show because they're being gentle with them. But you can be, again, firm but kind. And I referenced the book, The Collapse of Parenting by Leonard Sachs. He talks a lot about that in there as well, that parents in the United States specifically have kind of lost their way and let their kids run the show.
Sounds like a good podcast episode.
About authoritative parenting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I'll add it to the list. Along the lines of that, I saved this video a while ago and I just haven't had the right time to share it, but her name is Allie, and I followed her from her OG days of Inspiralized. She basically pioneered the spiralized veggie craze, and she still does recipes, but it's just not just that anymore. And I still follow her and I like all her lifestyle content, but she actually has 4 kids and her latest 2 are twins, so I also connect to her on that level. But she gave a post that I'll share, and the headline of it was "Be their coach, not their referee." And she was thinking back to doing sports as a kid, and the referee never taught her anything except that what she was doing wrong. The coach is who had the lasting impacts and words with them. And this is very similar to the books I've mentioned, Hunt, Gather, Parent, Siblings Without Rivalry. Basically, say less, let them figure it out, but kind of shape them and equip them to figure it out, and then acknowledge versus praise. I never learned a thing from my referee, only my coach. So I really liked that.
I like that. Yeah.
Okay. The next thing Nick first shared with me, and it's the Cut article about adult friendships and how they can't survive kids. And go ahead.
Just be aware it's a 46-minute read. So it's a long article. I'm not finished with it yet, but I got the high points.
Yeah, he sent me a TikTok video about it, and then I actually read about it again this morning on a newsletter from Grace from The Stripe. I really like her content and her newsletter. And to kind of give context here, she is over 40 and does not have children. And so she has, I think, a good viewpoint on this article. It's a very pointed, fiery article, basically saying that, and I'll link it for you, basically saying how people with kids are like forget about their other friends, and
selfish and all this other stuff.
But also in the same vein, she's frustrated because those friends can't go out and party with her anymore. So it's kind of, it's like, okay, we have some things to unpack there.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about it. I don't know if we need to do a whole episode, but I think it is a good thing to talk about after I finish 46 minutes of my life of reading it. But it is interesting to me that people's expectations of their friends don't change after they have something like children. Your expectation of the way your friend can show up for you should change if they get a job that's 80% travel. It should change if all of a sudden they're not physically able to do the things you're used to doing, like play volleyball or basketball or whatever. I think there's a difference between caring for your friend and expecting them to be the version of themselves that you want and that serves you the best.
Right. And there was the phrase, which you probably haven't gotten to yet. There was a sentence where the people said, we went and stayed with our friends when we went back to this city, but we decided next time we're not staying there and we're getting a hotel. And if they want to see us, they can get a sitter. And if they can't, so be it. That's a line in the article. And I just think that is so one-sided. I think there was maybe some issues because IVF was mentioned. I think if all of your friends are having kids and you're not able to, and that's something that you want, I think that that's really hard. And so there's some validity in that. But it's not just about one person in the article. And Grace, the reason I mentioned her again is she doesn't have children. She's above the age of 40. And she says, this girl who wrote this probably is like, I don't know, 20-ish years younger than me. And she actually, it was in her newsletter. So if you ever want to read it, I can forward you the newsletter because I get it if you want to read Grace's thoughts on it. But she says, I was frustrated with my friends when I was still in, my 20s, my late 20s, my friends who had kids. And there was a group that I had that we kind of crumbled and aren't really friends anymore, not because anything bad happened, but because, different life stages. And she said, I wasn't the best friend to them. And now going through it where she has sisters who have kids, and she's, the over-invested aunt is what she calls herself, and she loves them. She can relate to a lot of people in that way where she couldn't in her 20s. And then also, again, just realizing people change. And I don't know, the person who wrote the article, I don't know that I would want to be friends with them. It doesn't sound, to your point, that it's a two-way relationship. To say, like, get a sitter, and if not, I guess I won't see you, is really hard. And I think parents just there is a part of them that wants to have not the old life back. We like our life now, but we do make it a point to see friends and get a babysitter and things like that. It's hard.
I honestly think we should have like a mini episode about this after we finish the article, because I have a lot of thoughts and questions. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to support the writer. Like, I can see a situation where she's friends with a set of parents or a lot of parents who don't try at all to flex towards a relationship with her, and I could see how that's frustrating. I've heard the stories about like the parents who just become completely self-involved and only about their kid and leave their friends by the wayside. So I can understand that being frustrating. I think that the way I'm reading this article without that knowledge of whether that's her specific situation is that this person is either embittered or really not considering equally the needs of their friends who are parents in relation to their own.
I think there's some growing up to do again, because it's referenced multiple times, like, oh, they won't go out and get drunk or like do party favors and things like that. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, but like, I think what I'm saying is it's not a fair expectation that everything around your life, including your friends, becomes about your kids when you have kids, right? That's something the parents can take ownership of. But equally, it's not a fair expectation of your friend that the relationship with you won't need to flex and change a little bit, maybe still stay as close or get deeper, but need to flex and change as a result of them having kids. There has to be like equal effort on both sides, Yeah.
Two-way relationship, two-way street.
Yeah.
And
it's tough.
Another thing that was said in the article was that one friend she didn't invite to a barbecue because they just had a baby. And I think that that's something that's hard because, again, as a mom, you're in this you can't go back to who you were. You've birthed a new self besides just another person. And you can't go back to the way that was. And that changes you in a lot of ways. your brain changes, your body changes, you have a new person to take care of. And so you do kind of ache for some of your old life. Not,
Sure.
it just sounds bad, and I don't mean it that way, but the carefreeness
I
of
don't
it.
think it sounds bad.
Okay, good. I just don't want someone to, I don't want to be a headline. And
Well, you're not saying that you're resenting your kid. You're not going that
yeah,
far. Like it's completely fine to miss pieces of the past. Doesn't mean you hate your present.
yeah. My main point is that you should continue to invite mom friends places, even though they might not be able to go. And
Yeah.
they say that in their, um, I'll just let you read the article. There's a lot about that specific thing where she's like, I don't want to get into it, but basically she said, you just had a C-section. And she's like, no, I didn't. And I'm like, you weren't even aligned to know that she didn't have a major surgery. She had a vaginal birth, which are able to usually recover from faster. And she was like, yeah, I wouldn't have been able to go, but I still would have liked the invite to feel included. Like, you still want to be around me. And it's clear that this person does not want to be around her anymore.
I'm smiling because my literal next question was going to be, you're a new mom. This is you, right? You're a new mom. Would you rather be invited knowing you have to say no or not be invited?
Be invited and know that I was wanted there.
Yeah,
That I
which
was
you
thought
already
about.
just said. It's you took
Yeah.
the point, but yeah, it's we don't have to keep this in the podcast, but I think that's a very interesting parallel to when like you don't like to ask people for things because you know that they're going to say no, so you're taking the opportunity away from them to answer the way they want to answer. I'm not trying to criticize you, and this isn't for the podcast, but just those things connected in my mind. When I'm telling you, just ask, even if it's a 90% probability they're going to say no, that's what I mean. Like give that you just said as the receiver, you would rather be asked.
I know. I just have to hype myself up sometimes because I feel like a burden. And even just yesterday, I said to you, I said, should I text this person? I don't know. I don't think they'll even be able to go. And you're like, you should ask them and let them decide. But then I just feel dumb, especially when people, and there's nothing wrong with this, when people have like the red, like you're able to see when they open your message and then it just says red and you're like, do you hate me? I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's a personal
like,
problem.
So this maybe can stay in the podcast. If you have a new baby and you're not able to do a bunch of stuff, you're not able to say yes to a lot of invites. If you receive an invitation from somebody, do you think they're placing an undue burden on you if you need to say no?
No, sometimes I do feel pressure to say yes to things, but that's outside of having a kid. It still is a problem for me.
Yeah, that's different. That's a different thing, I think. We should draw a line. I'm talking to myself here too. This is something I think we should talk about maybe in a mini episode.
Yeah. Okay. So to tie a bow on it for now, I will link the article. If you want Grace's newsletter, I will forward it to you. Just ask me. And then also she linked a rebuttals to the post also that I was someone's Substack that I also really liked and liked the points, and Grace did too. So I will link those two things in the show notes. And again, if you want the Grace's newsletter, I am happy to forward that to you. And now for our Ask BGMAD segment. It's how we end every episode. And we basically just give this time to you to ask a question, have us give you our thoughts, our answers, and work things through with you. So we have one today. And the question was, how do you deal with out-of-state parents through pregnancy and birth? I'm starting this stage.
I mean, I don't really know. How do we even answer this? This isn't our situation at all.
Yeah. So Nick and I live in California. My parents live in Texas. Nick's parents live in Washington. So we are quite literally out of state through raising our children. I would say it's harder than I thought it would be. So kind of start prepping yourself mentally for that now. I think you just have to have really good communication and planning skills and laying it all out is how I would start it.
This is a weird way to answer this question. If you were to ask me, should we do an episode on how to deal with having your family away from you when you're raising children, I don't think I'm ready to have that episode yet. And not because I'm upset with anything. It's just like, I really don't have great recommendations yet. I feel like I might have some from the baby stage, like right when they come home from the hospital. I think there's a lot of things we've already talked about there that are helpful, but I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I think something I would say is you're not doing something wrong if you're in this situation. You're not taking things away from your your parents who are going to be grandparents. You're not taking things away from your kids if you're choosing to live in another place. I mean, Lauren's looking at me weird right now, but that's the way I feel. And those thoughts can be separate from, do I want them to have more time with their grandparents? And do I want their grandparents to have more time with them? Those are obvious yeses for me.
So I think what you're trying to say, I'm looking at you weird because I think I know what you're trying to say and you didn't say it. I
Okay.
think what you're saying is something you might deal with being out of state with your parents is guilt around that. And
Yeah, that's
the
a
way
good
to
summary.
think about that is that you're not doing something wrong. You're doing what's best for your family, and it may not be ideal and it may be harder, but that doesn't make it wrong.
Right. And it gets to, we've already spoken about the comparison piece in the last few episodes. But in this one specifically, we talked about comparing yourself to the moms or the dads who you feel like are the super parents and are doing way more than you and have better things than you do, financially or situationally or whatever. I do not agree that families who have more money are inherently better off than those who don't. I don't agree that families who are closer to the people who had babies are inherently better than those who aren't. I think the way that you raise those kids, I don't know, I'm not saying it correctly. You're looking at me weird. I'm feeling
No,
self-conscious.
there are statistics where kids raised around their grandparents do better. I don't have them right in front of me, but I know that there are statistics.
I get that. What I'm saying though is like people who live doors down from their grandparents may see them less than we're allowing Cypress and Olive to see theirs.
Everybody's different. So just because
that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. It's like just being there or being away is not something you should feel better or guilty about. You need to create the environment for your children that you want them to be in, and you're not limited in doing that. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So guilt is a good way to summarize it. Thank you for saying that. Like I don't feel that guilt, or at least recognize when you're feeling it and try and change those thoughts a little bit. Because you're not if you've chosen to live somewhere else, especially like, I would be very surprised if people are like, I'm going to have a baby, I am moving away from my family, because, like, that's not why
it does exist, but yeah.
Sure. But I doubt that's like, if you're somewhere else, you've gone somewhere else for a reason. And having children doesn't mean all of a sudden they're at a disadvantage or in a worse situation, or you're doing something to them or your parents or their other respective relatives as a result of living somewhere else. That's what I'm trying to say. So guilt is a good thing.
It's all relative. As far as, I think those are good points and things that you might deal with. As far as action items for you, like I mentioned at the beginning, I would just be very communicative and plan. So my parents, basically, my mom says, I want to see you every 6 weeks. So they make a point to see us every 6 weeks, whether that's coming here. So if a trip aligns and we're able to go there, then we're not checking a box, but right, that checks the box for them. They don't have to necessarily come to us in LA, but they do make a point to come and see us here. And I would just have boundaries, and have the family coming to visit know what your schedule is and know what your wishes are, because it can be hard, I assume, if they're staying with you in your home, to kind of accommodate everything. And so make sure that they're aware of what your wishes are and kind of how you're running things, more or less. And just, I don't know, it can be hard, but it can also be very helpful. And just travel is what I would do in that first year. In the first 2 years, they are free on the airplane, right? So you're just paying for your ticket and or your spouse's. So don't be afraid to travel with them. And also FaceTime is great. That's kind of what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked about FaceTime compared to screen time. Like we almost don't really consider it, like. Yeah,
it's real people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, I understand that it is hard. We understand that it is hard.
Yeah.
If we've said before, like if there's a perfect situation where if we could live where we wanted to live and simultaneously be next door to the family members, that would be ideal. And it's just not possible.
Yep. But we feel you. If you have any more questions on that specifically, or any question, feel free to ask us.
To the earlier point of this podcast, you're not alone.
You're not alone. We are so thankful for you. Thank you so much for listening, and we're excited to grow more with you.
Yeah, thanks for growing with us.
See you next time.
Boy, girl, mom, and dad, gotta wash those butts together. It's a trip, but we'll guide you through with tips and tricks for boys and girls too.